"You're not coming, Mom. It's a family trip," Janet said, setting her wine glass down with a softness that felt rehearsed. A real family trip. She didn't even look at me when she said it, just rearranged the cutlery like she hadn't dropped a grenade between us. That phrase, real family, sank like ice water through my spine. I sat there, 74 years old, hands folded, polite smile still frozen on my face. I thought maybe she misspoke, that maybe it was a joke said poorly, but her husband nodded in agreement, and the kids kept eating, eyes down, as if they'd been prepped for this dinner. I didn't say a word, not even when she added, it's easier this way. We need space. The kids need space." I drove home in silence. The radio stayed off. My old sedan rattled slightly on the highway as Wilmington shrank behind me, the same town I'd lived in since 1969. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. Back in my kitchen, I made tea I didn't drink. The kettle's whistle had long gone quiet by the time I noticed it had boiled. They were going to Sicily. A 12-day trip. A villa near Ragusa. Private pool. Seaside dinners. Horseback riding for the children. Wine tasting for the adults. I knew because I'd seen the itinerary. The itinerary I paid for. The invoice had come to my email by accident. Or perhaps they'd simply forgotten to remove my name from the booking info after using my credit card. I was listed as the main guest. That was last month. "Mom," Janet had said back then, "could you help us book something special for the kids? A family experience. They'll remember it forever." Of course I'd said yes. I always did. Just like I did for their mortgage top-up, for the minivan, for Ben's braces, for Emma's dance school, for Janet's real estate license. I closed the laptop slowly that night, sat in the dark. The house was quiet except for the slow ticking of the old wall clock. They were leaving in 5 days. And I wasn't family. I reached for my phone, not to call her, not to argue. I opened the banking app instead. Tomorrow, I would call the bank. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting the faint cracks in the plaster. The bedroom felt colder than usual, though it was July. I reached for the quilt my mother made decades ago. The edges were fraying, but the weight was familiar. In the morning, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the neighborhood stir. The Thompson sprinkler kicked on across the street. A dog barked 2 houses down. A jogger passed with music leaking from his earbuds. The world, in its indifference, moved on. I thought about Janet, about the way her tone had changed over the years. At first it was, "Mom, I don't know how we'd manage without you." Later it became, "Mom, it would mean a lot if you could help just this once." Then came, "Mom, this is just how things are now." But I remembered how it used to be. When she was 3, Janet would refuse to fall asleep unless I sang her that silly lullaby, something about a fox and a fiddle. When she was 8 and afraid of the dark, I taped glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling and told her they were guardians. When she was 12 and her best friend moved away, she cried in my lap for hours. When she was 16 and failed her driving test, I drove her through that same parking lot every afternoon until she passed. Her father, Charlie, had passed when she was 11. Heart attack. Quick, they said. Unexpected. I hadn't expected anything quick after that. I worked nights cleaning offices, day shifts at the grocery store. I saved every bit I could. Bought this house with his insurance payout. Paid off Janet's college loans myself. She never asked me to. I just did it. It was what mothers did. When she married Aaron, I gave them a check for $25,000. My entire emergency fund, She cried then, said she'd pay me back. Of course she didn't. That wasn't the point. Over the years, I began to disappear from her life. Not all at once, not loudly, just softly. Fewer visits, quicker phone calls, conversations that skimmed across the surface of things. When I offered to babysit, it was accepted with relief, but never with warmth. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself she was busy. I told myself she loved me in her own way. That family was complicated, that maybe I was asking too much. But when someone tells you that you're not part of the real family, it sharpens everything, past and present. What you did, what they took, what they erased. I pulled out the folder from the bottom drawer of the sideboard, the one with the paid invoices, the receipts, the travel agency email printout, the $14.80 charge for the villa in Ragusa, the airline tickets, the tours, the car rental, every cent charged to my card, quietly, naturally, as if it was a given. I placed them in a neat pile on the kitchen table. Then I reached for the phone. It was time to call the bank. "Mrs. Sanders, good morning," said the voice on the line. "This is Dana from Pacific Horizon Bank. How can I assist you today?" Her tone was cheerful, efficient. She didn't know I'd been awake since 4 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table in my robe with my second pot of coffee going cold. "Dana," I said slowly, "I need to talk to someone about reversing some payments. Travel-related transactions." There was a pause, just a second too long. I imagined her looking up my account on her screen, seeing the numbers. "Yes, of course. I can help with that. Are you referring to the recent charges to Ital Vista Travel Group?" "Yes," I said. "All of them." Another pause. She was trying to sound neutral, professional. "That's a fairly large set of transactions, Mrs. Sanders. May I ask, are you disputing the charges? Or requesting cancellation?" "Cancellation." "I see. One moment while I check which items are still eligible for reversal. Some of these may be non-refundable." I waited. My eyes drifted across the living room. The threadbare couch. The framed photo of Charlie and me on the porch with baby Janet in my arms. A sun-faded crocheted throw on the armrest. Dana came back. "All right. So here's what I see. The villa booking is refundable with a 10% penalty if canceled today. The airline tickets have a cancellation window, though there's a fee. The guided excursions, those are fully cancelable. The car rental, too. Shall I proceed with all of them?" "Yes," I said. "Very well. I'll file the cancellation requests now. You'll receive confirmation emails as each one is processed. The refunds, minus fees, will return to your account within 5 to 7 business days." "Thank you," I said. And then, almost as an afterthought, "Can you also make a note that no further charges are to be authorized from that merchant without my direct approval?" "Certainly." We ended the call politely, like two strangers finalizing a transaction. But for me, it was something else. I set the phone down and looked at the neat stack of papers again. $14,880 for a vacation I wasn't invited to. They would be flying out in 4 days. They didn't know yet that nothing was booked anymore. I stared at the clock. 11:43 a.m. By now, Janet was probably at lunch with her colleagues, sipping something iced and green, laughing about something her youngest had said. She wouldn't check the travel app until later, maybe that evening, maybe not until the airport. I didn't care. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. A rebalancing. That night, I reheated soup I'd made 2 days ago. Took out the good china just because. I poured a small glass of red wine and lit a candle. I ate alone at the dining table, slowly, deliberately. And for the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not yet. There was a stillness in the air the morning after, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I moved through it quietly, as if my silence could stretch the peace a little longer. I fed the cat, watered the ferns by the front windows, opened the curtains to let in the hot Wilmington light. My phone buzzed around 10, a group text from Janet. "Don't forget, Sicily in 3 days. Emma, did you pack your white sandals? Ben, passport is in the kitchen drawer. Aaron, you are handling the rental car this time." The message was full of cheerful authority, little emojis, family rhythm. I wasn't included in the planning, of course. I was only in that group chat because once, years ago, Janet had added me so I'd feel included. Now it was mostly a window into a world I no longer belonged to. I stared at the text for a moment, then put the phone face down on the table. The irony didn't sting as sharply as I'd expected. I'd canceled the trip less than 24 hours ago, and they were still preparing for it like it was set in stone. I felt a strange calm watching their excitement. I knew what they didn't, and that made all the difference. Later that day, I went into town. I needed eggs, and I wanted to pick up a few envelopes at the stationery store. There was a crispness in my step I hadn't felt in a while. I parked by the curb and walked past the bakery where Charlie used to buy cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings. Same sign in the window. Fresh before noon. Same sweet smell spilling onto the sidewalk. In the stationery aisle, I found what I needed. Heavy cream envelopes, the good kind. I didn't need them for anything urgent. I just wanted to write again. Letters, maybe. A list of things I still wanted to do. Not a bucket list, more like a remembering list. At the checkout, the cashier smiled. "Doing some mailing today?" "Eventually," I said. "Some things take time." When I got back home, there was a voicemail blinking. I pressed play, heart already settling into stillness. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. We're trying to finalize a few things with the travel agency, but keep getting an error on the booking site. Weird glitch, I guess. I know you helped with the booking, so I wondered if you'd gotten any emails. Anyway, call me when you can." Her voice was casual, slightly distracted, as if we were just two teammates working through a scheduling issue. As if she hadn't said what she said. As if she hadn't excluded me. I didn't call back. Instead, I made a small pot of tea and took it out to the porch. The heat was heavy but not unbearable, and the shade from the old dogwood tree made it feel tolerable. I rocked gently, watching the street. A man walked by with a stroller. A woman jogged past with her golden retriever. 2 teenage boys rode bikes too fast down the hill, whooping. At some point, I remembered something Janet had said years ago. Maybe 12, maybe 15. We were in the backyard after a barbecue. She'd just put Emma to bed. Her wine glass was nearly empty. "You know, Mom," she said, "sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I didn't have you around. Not in a bad way. I mean, just if I had to figure things out alone." At the time, I took it as a compliment. That I'd been her safety net. Her anchor. Now, I saw the other edge to it. She'd never had to figure anything out. Not really. Not the money, not the logistics, not the consequences. I was always there, unseen, reliable, willing. A shadow behind her spotlight. Not anymore. That evening, I received 3 more messages. 2 from her, 1 from Aaron. Short, increasingly tense, asking about the booking, the card, the website. One even had a screenshot with a red error message on the screen. I didn't answer. By nightfall, I knew the questions would turn to calls, maybe even a visit. And when they did, I would be ready. But tonight? Tonight, I poured another glass of wine, and I wrote, for the first time in years, a letter to myself. Dear Mabel, well done. The first call came at 7:18 the next morning. I was in the garden, still in my nightgown, pulling weeds from the bed where the tulips had bloomed last spring. My phone rang in the kitchen, and I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. When I finally walked in, barefoot and sweating slightly, there were 6 missed calls. 3 from Janet, 1 from Aaron, 1 from Emma's dance. That would be Emma, borrowing her mother's phone again, and 1 from an unknown number, which I assumed was the travel agency. I made toast, buttered it, ate it standing by the sink. Then the phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Janet. Mom, what's going on? The villa reservation is gone. Did you cancel it? Call me. The tone had changed. The emojis were gone. I rinsed my plate and wiped my hands on a towel. Then I sat down, composed a reply, and deleted it. Then did it again. 4 times. Finally, I wrote, me. Yes, I canceled it. Since I wasn't family, I assumed my money wasn't needed. I hit send and put the phone down. No explanation, no apology, just clarity. The reply came fast. Janet. What the hell are you talking about? This affects all of us. The kids are devastated. How could you be so petty? Petty. That word rolled around in my mind as I poured myself a second cup of coffee. Was it petty to reclaim my own money? Was it petty to say, I will no longer be left out of the things I pay for? Was it petty to stop pretending I didn't hear the things they said when they thought I wouldn't react? The phone rang again. I answered this time. Mom. Her voice was sharp, brittle. What did you do? I canceled the bookings, I said calmly. The villa, the flights, the tours, everything. But why? You said you'd help. You said it was for the kids. No, I said. You said it was for the kids. I said I would pay for a family trip. And then you told me I wasn't family. There was silence. Then she scoffed. You're twisting things. I didn't mean it like that. You always do this. Always make everything about you. I closed my eyes. A slow exhale. I'm 74 years old, Janet, I said. I've been quiet for a long time, paid for more things than you'll ever know, accepted scraps of your time and pretended they were love. You don't get to rewrite the rules because now they've stopped working in your favor. She was quiet again. Then came the real voice, the one beneath the performance. We told the kids, Mom. We showed them pictures. Ben was so excited for the horses. Emma made a packing list. What am I supposed to tell them now? I almost softened. Almost. But I remembered something. 2 months ago, after Emma's dance recital, Janet had taken photos with everyone. Aaron, his parents, her in-laws, even the coach. I stood by the door, waiting. She didn't wave me over. When I asked later, gently, if she'd gotten a photo with me, she said, "Oh, I think Aaron's mom did. I'll ask her to send it." She never did, so I said now, "Tell them the truth, that you made choices, and choices have consequences." She hung up. That afternoon, Aaron showed up. Loud knock. Dark sunglasses. I didn't open the door. He left after a few minutes, but not before muttering something I couldn't hear through the glass. It didn't matter. I was done with noise. Done with people who only remembered I existed when their plans were at risk. Later that night, I lit a candle on the porch. The sun was low, the air thick with summer. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed. Probably neighbors. I thought about what I'd do with the money. Not the dollars. They weren't important. The power of it. The decision. The reclaiming of my own place. Tomorrow, I'd call the lawyer. There were documents to revisit. Accounts to shift. The foundation had been shaken, and now I would rebuild it. On my own terms. It's strange, the silence that follows confrontation. Not like peace, more like the quiet after an earthquake, when dust still hangs in the air and the walls haven't yet decided whether they'll hold or fall. The day after Aaron came to the door, I heard nothing. No texts, no voicemails, no knocks, not even a drive-by from Emma, who often biked past the house on her way to practice. I should have felt victorious, maybe, or relieved. Instead, I felt something different. Space. Not empty, just spacious. Like a room I'd always been shoved into suddenly had windows. By mid-afternoon, I finally turned my phone back on. There was only one new message. Ben. Ben, 12. Grandma, are you mad at Mom? What happened to the trip? Just that. 12 words that pulled tighter than anything else had. I sat down on the couch, the phone in my lap, my fingers hovering over the screen. What could I say to a child? One who didn't understand that love wasn't measured in amusement parks or airplane tickets? I typed and erased a dozen replies before settling on. Me. I'm not mad at anyone, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions, and they're not always easy. I love you very much. He didn't respond. I didn't expect him to. I put the phone away and went to the garage, where I kept an old trunk of photo albums and documents. Janet never liked the garage, said it smelled of dust and memory, but I'd always found it comforting. It was where Charlie kept his fishing gear, where we stored the Christmas decorations, where time felt honest. I pulled the trunk into the house and opened it. Inside, my wedding photo. Janet's birth certificate. Old report cards. Receipts from the early years. Diapers. Her first crib. The nightgown I bought after Charlie died. The envelope from her first paycheck, the one she proudly handed to me at 19, saying she'd take me out for dinner with it. I'd kept it. The ink had faded, but the memory hadn't. There were also letters. One from her after a college breakup, telling me I was the only person who understood her. Another from a school trip in 8th grade, signed, Your best friend always. I stared at them a long time. I wondered what changed. And when. The answer didn't come. Only a hollow ache that no money could fill. By evening, I'd made a decision. Not out of spite, not for punishment, but because some lines, once crossed, need to be drawn again, with permanent ink. I called my bank first. Asked to schedule an in-person meeting. I wanted to ensure all my accounts were secure, that no one else had access. I'd allowed Janet limited access years ago. For emergencies, I told myself. She never abused it exactly, but she'd come close. Now I wanted it gone. Then I called Martin Sharp, my lawyer. A polite, quiet man who'd handled Charlie's will and helped me when I refinanced the house. Martin, I said, I need to make changes to everything. His voice didn't waver. Of course, Mrs. Sanders. When would you like to come in? Tomorrow. Would you like to discuss anything in advance? Yes, I said. I'd like to set up a trust. For my granddaughter, Emma. There was a brief pause. Not for your daughter? No. I heard him adjust papers, his tone shifting into quiet professionalism. Very well. I'll prepare the preliminary documents. We'll go through them together. Thank you, Martin. After I hung up, I sat in the kitchen with the last sliver of sunset hitting the linoleum. I let it warm my ankles. It wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of truth. I didn't want to punish anyone. I just wanted to protect what little I had left. My peace, my voice, my worth. And if that meant drawing lines, bold, unflinching, undeniable, then so be it. Tomorrow, I would write my name beside them. The bank lobby was cool and quiet when I stepped inside the next morning. Air-conditioned air, floral carpet, the faint hum of printers behind the glass. I'd worn my best linen pants and a button-down I hadn't put on in years. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel solid, present, not some invisible woman withdrawing into herself. Dana, the bank rep I'd spoken with earlier, recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Sanders," she said, standing quickly. "We've got a room ready for you." She led me into a small office with a frosted glass wall and a sleek table that didn't quite match the worn armchairs. She pulled up my file on her screen while I settled into the seat. "I've flagged all recent transactions from Ital Vista Travel and confirmed that all pending charges have been halted. The refunds are in progress, minus cancellation fees." I nodded. "Good. I'd also like to revoke any and all authorized users on my accounts." Dana glanced up. "Including your daughter?" "Especially my daughter." She didn't flinch, just nodded once and began typing. Her fingers moved fast, efficient. She'd seen enough to know when not to ask questions. "I'd also like to move a portion of the funds into a new trust account, under the name of my granddaughter, Emma Corrine Wallace. She's 15. She paused, looked at me carefully. "Do you want that to be active immediately or triggered at a certain age?" I thought about it. 18, I said. "But I want to leave a clause. She has to write me a letter, not a legal document, just something real, something that says what she wants to do with her life, even if she changes her mind later." Dana smiled softly. "We can make that work." While she finalized the paperwork, I sat there, looking out the glass at the bank's waiting area. A young couple was there with a toddler, the mother bouncing him gently on her knee while the father scrolled through something on his phone. Their exhaustion was visible, but so was their togetherness. I wondered what it would be like to have that again, a family that leaned in instead of pushing out. An hour later, everything was signed, accounts locked down, access revoked, trust created. It was done. Outside, the July air wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't asked for. Too warm, a little sticky, but I welcomed it. It was real. Next was Martin's office, 2 blocks over in a squat beige building that had looked outdated since the late 80s. The receptionist offered me water, then led me in. Martin stood when I entered. "Mrs. Sanders, come in, please." He looked the same as always, thin hair, brown tie, glasses that always slid just slightly down his nose. We went through the will. I crossed out names, shifted percentages, added Emma specifically and clearly, and I added one final clause. No claim or challenge from other family members will be accepted without a personal handwritten letter, submitted while I am alive. Martin raised an eyebrow at that. "They'll have time to explain themselves," I said simply, "while it still matters." He nodded. When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. But it was the exhaustion that comes after doing something necessary, like chopping firewood or cleaning out a closet you've avoided for years. Back home, I made myself a sandwich, sat on the porch. The phone buzzed on the table next to me, but I didn't look. Somewhere inside, I felt something loosen. Not joy, not revenge, just a small reclaiming of space, of voice, of myself. The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. It wasn't in an envelope, just a sheet of lined notebook paper folded twice, with my name, Grandma, written across the top in blue ink. Emma's handwriting. I stood at the mailbox for a moment before opening it. The sun was already climbing, the air thick and slow. A mockingbird was perched on the fence, chirping like it knew something I didn't. Inside, the note was simple. Grandma, Mom, and Dad are freaking out. They say we're not going on the trip anymore because of something you did. I don't know what happened. I just know I miss you. I didn't ask them to leave you out. I thought you didn't want to come. That's what they told us. I love you. Please call me. Emma. I sat down right there on the porch step, the paper trembling in my hands. They told her I didn't want to come. Of course they did. It was easier than admitting the truth, that they'd made a choice, to exclude, to diminish, and now the consequences were rippling through their tidy plans. I went inside, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the note for a long time. She was just a girl. Not innocent, not exactly. She saw more than they thought, but still learning where the fault lines ran. Still learning which voices to trust. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. Not Janet's, not the house. Emma's. She answered on the first ring. Grandma? Hi, baby, I said, my voice a little thinner than I wanted it to be. I got your note. Are you okay? She asked quickly. Are you mad? No, sweetheart, I'm not mad. I'm just sad. Sad that things were said that shouldn't have been, and sad that you were caught in the middle. There was a long silence. They told us you didn't want to come, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't believe it. Not really. You were right not to. More silence. Then, I really wanted you there. I wanted to show you the sea turtles. I wanted to sit on the balcony and drink hot chocolate like we did that time in Georgia. I smiled, though my eyes stung. I wanted that too, I said. More than you know. Can't we still go? She asked, a tremble in her voice. Just you and me? My throat caught. We'll find our own trip, I said gently. One where no one gets to decide who belongs. She sniffled. Mom's going to be so mad I called. She might. But sometimes doing what's right means making people angry, especially people who are used to being in charge. I heard footsteps in the background. Muffled voices. I have to go, Emma whispered. But thank you for calling. I love you. I love you too, honey. Always. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared out the window. That call had changed something. Not everything, but something. Emma had reached across the line, and I'd answered. Later that day, Janet texted again. Janet. Unbelievable. Manipulating your granddaughter now? You're seriously crossing a line. I didn't respond, because for once I wasn't reacting. I was choosing, and I had no intention of crossing back. She came in the late afternoon. I heard her car before I saw it. Too fast down our quiet street, tires crunching the gravel shoulder. She didn't park in the driveway like she used to. She pulled up crooked by the curb, engine idling for a moment before she finally shut it off. Janet. I watched from the kitchen window as she climbed out, slammed the door, and stood there like she was deciding whether to come in or blow the whole thing off. She didn't knock. She let herself in with the key I'd given her years ago, the one I'd forgotten still hung on her keyring. I didn't move. She walked straight into the kitchen, where I stood rinsing lettuce from the garden, and set her sunglasses on the counter with a practiced clatter. I want to talk, she said. I turned off the tap and faced her. Then talk. She was already halfway into her speech, the one she'd probably rehearsed in the car. I can't believe you'd sabotage something like this. Do you have any idea how much this trip meant to the kids? To Aaron and me? It was the first time in 5 years we were going to take a real vacation, and you told me I wasn't family, I said, calm and even. Her mouth opened, then closed. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it. I was frustrated. I was tired. You always twist things into some kind of drama. No, I said. What I did was finally stop funding a life I'm not allowed to be part of. She crossed her arms. This is about money, then? That's what it always comes down to. No, I said again. It's about respect, about being spoken to like a person, about not being erased. She looked away, toward the fridge, like she was searching for a neutral object to fix her eyes on. I never asked you to pay for anything, she muttered. You never had to, I replied. It was just expected. Every request came wrapped in guilt or wrapped in silence. Either way, I delivered. She shook her head. You're being so dramatic. We could have talked about this, we still can. But not like this. Not with you punishing everyone. Is that what you think this is? I asked. A punishment? Emma's heartbroken, Ben's confused, Aaron's furious. You've left chaos in your wake, and for what? To prove a point? No, I said. To stop disappearing. That stopped her. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, quieter. You've been holding this in for a long time. I nodded. Too long. She ran her hands through her hair. She looked tired now, not angry, just worn. What do you want me to say? She asked. That I'm sorry? That I messed up? I tilted my head. That would be a start. She sat down at the kitchen table like her legs had given out. I stayed standing. You could have talked to me, she said again, softer this time. Instead of nuking everything. I sighed. I talked to you for 20 years, Janet. With my time, with my money, with my silence. I talked until there was nothing left in me to say. Now I'm done talking. She looked up at me, and for a second, I saw the little girl again, the one with scabbed knees and eyes too big for her face. Then it was gone. You really cut me out of everything? She asked. The accounts, the will, all of it? I nodded. And I'll be reviewing the title on the beach house next. She flinched like I'd struck her. That place was for the kids. And now it'll be for the one who remembers who built the shore under their feet. Her jaw tightened. We sat in silence for a while, a clock ticking somewhere in the hall, her unfinished apology hanging in the air between us like laundry on a line no one wanted to fold. Then she stood. Okay, she said. Message received. She picked up her sunglasses, walked to the door, and paused. You always said you didn't want to die alone, she said without turning around. I took a breath, steady and even. I still don't, I said. But I'd rather be alone than be invisible. And then the door closed behind her. That night, the house was still. Not the kind of silence that aches, but the kind that breathes. Steady, real, mine. I sat by the window in the armchair Charlie once claimed as his, the one with the worn arms and cushion that still held the shape of his back. A cup of tea rested on the windowsill. The street outside was dark except for the soft glow of a porch light across the road and the occasional blink of a passing car. I wasn't waiting for another confrontation. Not tonight. Janet wouldn't be back. I knew her well enough to know that when she left like that, straight-backed, words still simmering behind her teeth, She wouldn't return until she could control the script again. And that door was closed now. Tomorrow, I had another appointment. One I'd put off for too long. The next morning, I stood in front of the office of a man named Thomas Brandt, real estate attorney. The building was newer than Martin's, glass and steel with potted plants by the door. I'd called ahead to ask if he handled property title transfers and ownership restructuring. He did. When I walked into his office, Thomas was warm, respectful. Younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with the kind of gaze that stayed steady. He offered me water. I declined. "I want to review the current title structure of a beach property in Beaufort County," I said. "It's in my name, but there are transfer on death provisions set for my daughter." He tapped a few notes. "We can definitely take a look. If you're thinking of amending beneficiaries or putting it into a trust, there are a few routes." "I want to remove the TOD designation completely," I said, "and I want to ensure that the property can't be inherited by anyone who isn't explicitly named in my trust." He glanced up just once, then nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll prepare the draft." We worked in silence for a few minutes. I answered questions, confirmed parcel numbers, reviewed tax documents. When it was done, he printed the new documents and passed me the pen. "I'll need to notarize," he said gently. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked at the signature line, the ink heavy in my hand. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. I signed. The property, the same house they all begged to borrow every summer, the same house I paid for with the last of my savings, was no longer promised to the people who had treated me like a fixture, not a person. It would go to Emma, if and only if she wanted it, if and only if she understood the legacy it carried. After I left, I stopped at a small bookstore I used to visit when Janet was little. The owner, a woman named Claire, was still there. We'd known each other once, when we were both young mothers. I bought a journal, thick and bound in dark green linen. Back home, I made lunch, real lunch. Baked chicken thighs, rice with lemon and herbs, a little salad. I set the table for one and ate it all slowly. Then I sat down with the journal. On the first page, I wrote, "For Emma. If one day you want to know why I made the choices I did, read this." It wasn't about blame. It wasn't a list of grievances. It was a map. Through the slow erosion of love, the silences, the absences, the small humiliations. Through the moments of warmth, too. The days I still remember with tenderness. A legacy not of money, but of truth. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, I'd filled 5 pages. The phone rang once. Aaron. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't done writing. I spent the next 2 days in quiet motion, not retreating, just reorganizing. It felt like sweeping out an attic you'd been storing too much in for too long. Every drawer I opened, every cabinet I cleared, seemed to whisper the same thing. You don't need to carry this anymore. On Thursday morning, I pulled out a heavy old box from the hall closet. Inside were Janet's childhood mementos, her first ballet slippers, the chipped ceramic turtle she made in 3rd grade, a faded friendship bracelet still tied in a knot. For years, I couldn't bring myself to part with any of it. I kept thinking one day she'd want to go through it with me, laugh about the memories, maybe take something home. She never did. So I sat with that box in my lap, pulled out each item and asked myself, do I need this to remember her? One by one, I let them go. The house began to feel lighter, airier, as though it had been holding its own breath all this time, waiting for me to make a choice. and I had. That evening, the phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Grandma?" Emma's voice, quiet but clear. "Hi, sweetheart." A pause. "Can I come over?" My heart twisted. "Are you sure your mom's okay with that?" "I didn't ask," she said. I need to see you." 10 minutes later, she was at the door. She looked older than 15. Maybe it was the set of her mouth, or the way her backpack hung from one shoulder like she was already carrying more than she should have to. I made tea. She didn't want any, just sat at the kitchen table biting her lip, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "I think I understand now," she said. "Why you did what you did." I didn't say anything. "I asked Mom why you canceled the trip," she went on. "She said you were trying to teach us a lesson, that you wanted to embarrass her." Emma looked up, eyes searching mine. "But I think you were just tired of pretending." I nodded slowly. "That's exactly it." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a spiral notebook. "I started writing you a letter. You said I had to write one for the trust. I don't know if it counts yet, but I wanted to show you I was thinking about it." I took the notebook from her, careful not to rush. The first page was messy, words scribbled and crossed out, but I could see the effort in every line. She hadn't been told to do this. She chose it. We sat in silence for a long time. The quiet was full, not heavy. Then she asked, "Are you going to forgive Mom?" I took a breath. "I've been asking myself that," I said. "And the truth is, forgiveness doesn't always mean opening the door again. Sometimes it just means letting go of the hurt." Emma looked down, nodding. "You're not responsible for any of this," I added gently. "None of what's happened is your burden to carry." She blinked quickly, then reached for my hand. "I don't want us to stop being family," she whispered. "We won't," I said. "But from now on, it'll be the kind that's chosen, not just assigned." Later, when I walked her to the door, she turned and hugged me hard. Not the polite kind of hug teenagers give out of habit, but one that said, "I see you." And for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not because I was broken, but because something was finally beginning to heal. Friday morning arrived with a softness that surprised me. The sky was overcast. Light filtered gently through the windows, and for the first time in weeks, I woke up without the heavy stone of dread in my chest. I made breakfast slowly. Eggs, toast, real butter. No rush, no agenda, just time and quiet. My phone buzzed at 9:42 a.m., a voicemail. No ringtone. I'd silenced Janet's number days ago. Still, curiosity won. I played it back while washing dishes. "Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm asking you to think about what you're doing. You've always been the bigger person. You've always been better than this. I don't understand why you're throwing everything away over one bad moment." Emma came home in tears. "She thinks you hate us. Please, can we just sit down and talk?" Her voice cracked near the end. That familiar high pitch she used when emotions started leaking through her control. I dried my hands on the dish towel and stared out the window. The street was still. A bluebird hopped along the fence line. I didn't call her back. Not because I was angry, but because I'd already sat down. I'd already talked. For years. That afternoon, I went to the post office. I had 2 envelopes to mail, both thick with documents. One for Martin, with my final signed amendments, and one for Emma, with a handwritten note and the first few pages copied from my green journal. "Dearest Emma, this is not a history of pain, though you may read it that way at first. It's a history of remembering, of returning to myself. You may not agree with everything I've done. That's all right. But I hope you'll understand why it mattered that I did it. With all my love, Grandma. I placed the envelopes on the counter and paid for priority mail. Sending something important? The clerk asked kindly. Yes, I said. Very. Back home, I found myself drawn to the living room bookshelf. I hadn't touched it in ages. Among the cookbooks and gardening guides, there were old novels, photo albums, a few keepsake boxes. I pulled one down and opened it. Inside, Charlie's old watch, still ticking after all these years. A dried rose from our 25th anniversary dinner. And a note in his handwriting, folded in half, stained with time. I'd forgotten it existed. Mabel, you give and give and give. One day, I hope someone sees the cost. Love, C. I sat on the couch and held the note in both hands. He saw me. Back then, when no one else did. That evening, I walked through the house slowly, touching walls, rearranging a few frames, folding a throw blanket over the back of the couch. It was a kind of preparing, a quiet readiness. At sunset, I lit a candle. Then I pulled out a map. The last thing I did that night was circle a small coastal town I hadn't been to in 30 years. I wasn't running. I was choosing. And this time, the trip would be mine alone. The suitcase I pulled from the attic was older than Emma, a sturdy navy Samsonite with a zipper that stuck if you pulled too fast. It still had the faded airport tag from our trip to Charleston in 1997. Charlie had packed it back then, carefully rolling my cardigans like he was folding precious linen. I dusted it off, laid it open on the bed, and began to pack. Not much, just enough. 2 cotton dresses, comfortable shoes, my favorite sweater, soft with age but still warm, a wide-brimmed hat, the green journal. No one knew I was going. I hadn't told Janet. Not because I wanted to keep secrets. I was simply done making announcements to people who didn't listen. By mid-morning, I was at the train station. Wilmington's platform isn't much, just a long stretch of concrete with a tired bench and a vending machine that always eats your change. But the train arrived on time, its horn low and echoing across the tracks like an old friend clearing its throat. I boarded slowly, found my window seat, and sat down. The conductor nodded politely as he passed. As the train pulled away, I watched the town recede. The diner where we used to get milkshakes after Sunday church. The bookstore Janet loved as a girl. The park where I once sat through 4 hours of Emma's 3rd grade softball game. My town? My past? Shrinking, softening, not vanishing, just shifting into the background. The rhythm of the train calmed me. Steady. Predictable. Like a second heartbeat. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. Whatever message Janet had waiting, an apology, another plea, or more silence, it could wait. She had her choices. I had mine. I opened the green journal again and wrote one more line under yesterday's entry. Today, I left. Not because I was pushed, but because I finally knew the way forward. The landscape outside the window turned greener the further we went. Marshland gave way to trees, houses scattered out. The air seemed different, freer. I thought about Charlie, how he always wanted us to take a long road trip down the coast after retirement. We never did. Life got in the way. Or maybe we just forgot to choose it while we still could. So I chose it now. This wasn't a vacation. Not exactly. It was a restoration. A way to hear my own thoughts again, without the static of obligation. A chance to sit with the woman I used to be. The one who once believed she'd matter, even without her wallet open or her voice quiet. Somewhere around mile 60, a little boy across the aisle turned to me and asked, "Are you going home?" I smiled. "No," I said, but I think I'm getting closer. The train let me off in a town so small it didn't even bother with a proper station, just a wooden platform and a tin sign that read Bay Haven. One suitcase in hand, I stepped down onto the gravel and was hit by the scent of salt, sun, and something sweetly decaying in the way only coastal air can be. I hadn't been here in over 30 years. Bay Haven was where Charlie and I once spent a weekend in a rented cottage, long before Janet, long before bills and braces and the slow erosion of small resentments. Just the two of us and the ocean. He'd lost his wedding ring in the surf, and we laughed about it until the sky turned pink. I found a little inn at the edge of town, the Wren's Nest. 2 stories, painted seafoam green, with white wicker chairs on the porch, and a bell above the door that jingled like a question. The woman at the front desk wore a cardigan too thick for the weather and glasses on a chain. "Here for the writer's retreat?" she asked, glancing at my journal. "No," I said, smiling. "Just here to remember how to be alone." She blinked, then nodded, as if that made perfect sense. I paid cash, asked for a room facing west. That first night, I didn't unpack. I opened all the windows, turned off the ceiling fan, and let the ocean breeze stir the curtains like a restless guest. I sat on the bed, watching the sun drop behind the line of pines, my feet bare, the old floorboards cool beneath them. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't bracing for anything. No phone calls, no expectations. Just breath, space, and the quiet hum of being. The next day, I walked. Bay Haven had changed. New shops, more tourists. But the bones of it were still there. The pier with its peeling paint, the ice cream stand by the water, the bench where Charlie and I had once shared hush puppies wrapped in brown paper. I stopped at a cafe for lunch, grilled fish and sweet tea. The waiter looked about Emma's age. He called me ma'am and brought extra lemon slices without asking. When I went to pay, I paused, then asked if they sold gift cards. He nodded. "Sure. Any amount?" 100, I said. "Put the name Emma Wallace on it." He scribbled it down. "Special occasion?" "No," I said. "Just thinking of someone I love." I mailed it from the tiny post office down the street. No note, just the card and a receipt. That evening, back at the inn, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my legs and the journal in my lap. I didn't write much. Just one sentence. I am not where I was, but I am no longer where they left me. It wasn't poetry, but it was true. Around midnight, I woke up to thunder. Not loud, but close. The kind that sounds like someone dragging furniture across the clouds. I went to the window. Rain tapped the glass gently, like it was trying to be let in. I made tea in the little kitchenette and sipped it standing at the sink, wrapped in a towel, hair still damp from the earlier walk on the beach. The phone on the nightstand buzzed once. I checked it. A photo from Emma. She stood in the kitchen back home, holding the gift card, her face lit up with surprise. No caption. Just that smile. The kind that said, "I know this was from you, and I love you for it." My chest tightened, not with regret, with something softer. Something I hadn't allowed myself in a long time. Hope. I replied with a heart. Just one. Then turned the phone off again. The rain kept falling, and I let it. I stayed in Bay Haven for 6 more days. Every morning, I walked to the beach with my shoes in hand and let the sea greet me without questions. The tide was always different, but the rhythm was constant. Water in, water out. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that letting go is a cycle, not a single act. On the last morning, I packed slowly. folded each piece of clothing with care, not because I was returning to something, but because I was ready to carry myself differently. The green journal was heavier now, pages full, each line a small restoration. I left it on the nightstand for a moment while I sat by the window, one last look at the shoreline stretching into fog. The train back was quiet. I read, dozed, watched the landscape soften from coast to field to suburb. When I got home, the house greeted me with its usual creaks and sighs, but it no longer felt like a waiting room. It felt lived in again. Mine. In the following weeks, Janet didn't reach out. Not on my birthday. Not after Emma told her about the trust. Not after Aaron's cousin spotted me at the hardware store buying paint for the sunroom. And I didn't chase her. Emma came once a week, sometimes with questions, sometimes just to sit. She brought cookies she'd baked herself, her math homework, and once a list of places she wanted to see with someone who actually notices things. We picked one. Charleston, next spring. You promise? She asked. I do. Martin sent the finalized estate documents by courier. I signed without hesitation. No ceremony, no big moment. Just a quiet, firm pen stroke. Dana from the bank called to confirm the last transfer. You're all set, Mrs. Sanders. Everything's just how you asked. Good, I said. That's how it should be. One evening, I sat on the porch, tea in hand, and watched the neighborhood fold into dusk. A couple walked past, holding hands, arguing gently about dinner. A teenager biked by, earbuds in, nodding to some invisible beat. Across the street, the Thompsons' porch light clicked on automatically, and I realized something simple. No one had to understand what I did. They didn't have to approve or applaud or even forgive, because I didn't do it to be seen. I did it to stop disappearing. In the quiet, I thought about every woman like me. Every mother, grandmother, sister, friend. The ones who gave and gave until the giving hollowed them out. The ones told to be grateful, to be silent, to not make waves. To them, I say this: let the water rise. Let it carry you where you were too afraid to go. And when it finally recedes, stand tall in the sand, wet and alive, and know this: you are not the storm. You are what survives it. If this story found something true in you, share it. Write your own. Remember, the quiet ones remember everything.